With just 6 days to go before the start of the people of the state of New York versus Donald J. Trump, the ex-president's kitchen sink legal strategy is being met by a judiciary more than willing and capable to play whack-a-mole in swatting down Trump's attempts to stop this trial from ever starting. Just today, a judge rejected the ex-president's request to halt the case while he appeals that gag order that prevents him simply from lashing out at court staff, prosecutors, witnesses, jurors, and the family members of the district attorney as well as the judge. At a hearing earlier, prosecutors argued that Trump's threats go way beyond simply exercising one's First Amendment rights. They said that the threats against the staff forced the NYPD to get involved, and that even without Trump's dangerous rhetoric, the DA is having difficulty in getting witnesses to testify, since they all know ahead of time that Trump will come after them when their names are made public. Today's decision is the second time in just 24 hours that a New York court has handed Trump a legal defeat. Another judge rejected Trump's request to prevent the case from going to trial, while Trump tries to move the case out of New York. That was just 2 hours after his attorneys argued that Manhattanites could never make up a fair jury for Trump. All this means is that the stage is still set for a trial where the stakes for Donald Trump and the future of the country couldn't be any higher, as are the stakes for Alvin Bragg. What is arguably the case of his career has been dismissed time and time again. But the fact that we are 6 days away from a trial speaks to how Bragg has proven all of his naysayers and critics wrong. A sweeping brand new profile of the Manhattan district attorney in the New York Times today puts it like this, quote, after the indictment, a chorus of critics, some, but not all on the right, questioned the legal reasoning, the wisdom, and the winnability of the hush money case. Today, many experts believe that Bragg's legal strategy looks considerably stronger, validated by a federal judge who rebuffed Trump's effort to delay or even kill the case by having it moved to federal court, and by the Manhattan judge presiding over the case, who in February officially greenlit Bragg's premise by setting a trial date. At the heart of the case, a call for accountability for crimes committed, no matter how big or small they might appear. Here's how Bragg put it after Trump's arraignment last year.
True and accurate business records are important everywhere, to be sure. They are all the more important in Manhattan, the financial center of the world. That is why we have a history in the Manhattan DA's office of vigorously enforcing white-collar crime. My office, including the talented prosecutors you saw at arraignment earlier today, has charged hundreds of felony falsifying business records. This charge, it can be said, is the bread and butter of our white-collar work. And fraud presents itself in all different forms here in Manhattan. At its core, this case today is one with allegations like so many of our white-collar cases. Allegations that someone lied again and again to protect their interests and evade the laws to which we are all held accountable.
An ex-president desperate to avoid any form of legal accountability, going head-to-head with a prosecutor dead set on bringing his case against Trump to trial, is where we start today. With me at the table, two of the reporters bylined on that extensive New York Times Magazine new piece on Alvin Bragg. Pulitzer Prize-winning reporters Kim Barker and Michael Rothfeld are here. Their article appears this weekend in the Sunday Magazine, How Alvin Bragg Hitched His Fate to Trump. Plus, we are joined by former U.S. Attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Barbara McQuade. I want to start with the piece. It's fantastic. Alvin Bragg has done a lot of sort of quiet, thankless work of letting the facts speak for themselves. But he's also been aware of the moment in which he brought this case. He was the first. I remember, some people remember where they were when certain things. I remember where I was when Trump was first indicted. And the fact that he's going first wasn't obvious. It wasn't preordained. Just talk about being Alvin Bragg.
I can definitely not get in his head, although I've tried to for the past few months. I think anytime you report a story like this, you start trying to say, well, what would Alvin Bragg do? Our interpretation is that he brought this case first, not necessarily because he wanted to be first, right, but because he felt like the fact pattern was ready to go. And he was fine with other cases leapfrogging him. He's basically said as much. But it turns out this is the case going forward first, which seems sort of like poetry compared, with the fact that he was the first one to file it.
Right. What is the sort of David versus Goliath aspect like from Alvin Bragg's side? I mean, Jack Smith and DOJ are these giant, massive institutions that once Merrick Garland took the leap and appointed special counsel, I think people thought the weight of the Department of Justice would be the first legal consequence Trump would see for what had become increasingly brazen criminal conduct. Not so much. Here comes Alvin Bragg.
Right. I mean, Bragg is a state prosecutor. It's his first job in elected office, and he doesn't certainly have the fame that Donald Trump has. He's certainly not as prominent as Jack Smith, and the case also, as many have said, pales in comparison to trying to overturn an election. So this was portrayed as certainly small potatoes, but it did end up going first because all those cases are tied up, and a lot of people say it's a very solid case. I mean, it's a paperwork case, but the documents are there about how Trump tried to falsify, at least as he's accused of falsifying records to cover up his hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. So. It could end up being the potentially only trial before the election and maybe the first conviction of a former president. I
mean, to this point, it's so remarkable how Trump succeeds in dulling the senses, right? I mean, that this is even compared, and we have to make relative value judgments about how this stacks up to an insurrection case or classified documents at Mar-a-Lago case is ludicrous. But this case, and the reporting gets at this, was dissed, I think is a fair way to put it, by a lot of people legally and politically. But it has the most undeniable fact set, right? I mean, these are things that Trump barely denies, that this was kept quiet, that there was a tabloid media colluding partner, that Michael Cohen did the dirty deeds, that Hope Hicks was in the room. I mean, all of the witnesses to all of the conduct are Trump insiders, current and former. What do you think? What is your sense of how sort of meticulously Alvin Bragg lined all those pieces up?
Well, a lot of this was developed previously by federal prosecutors in the case against Mark Pomerantz, who came in to investigate Trump for Bragg, but also the federal prosecutors who prosecuted Michael Cohen, his former fixer, and they developed a lot of evidence about the hush money payments being a campaign finance violation. And so, for example, David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer and a friend of Trump's, who was involved in this hush money payment and another one, is expected to be a witness at this trial. Michael Cohen's going to be a witness at this trial. So all of this has sort of been developed over the course of a few years, and federal prosecutors never brought the case. Alvin Bragg then took all that evidence and then built upon it to bring this case. So,
does Alvin Bragg have a theory on why federal prosecutors never brought this case?
Well, I don't know what his theory is, but I mean, I think our sense is, well, they couldn't prosecute Trump while he was president because, you can't do that under DOJ policy. And then after, Michael Cohen would have been the main witness, as he is going to be here, but federal prosecutors did not want to rely on him because he has been convicted of several crimes. He has not told the truth on a number of occasions, and that's something that Trump's lawyers are going to attack Cohen for. Bragg was willing to take the chance on Michael Cohen being his chief witness, but I don't think the feds wanted to do that.
Which is, I mean, when the history is written, I think that's exactly right. And I think that Michael Cohen as a witness is something that Bragg seemed to take into account as he built this case. And you saw it in the witnesses coming in and out for many, 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 many months. Can you talk about what the last sort of year and a half has been like for Alvin Bragg?
I mean, I think that ever since he filed these charges, if we want to start there, but frankly, we could start a year before when he decided not to file the case and pursue the case that Pomerantz and Vance had advanced, which was much about like accounting, right? It's about overvaluing his properties and things like that. And since he actually went forward with this particular case, which was about a year ago at this point, in the very beginning, Alvin Bragg was completely under attack, right? In the very beginning, he's getting envelopes of white powder sent to his office. His children are vaguely threatened. His family is threatened. And I think that he, since then, has really tried to move forward with the other business of the office, right? Doing wage theft, doing like, you know, his whole campaign promise was like afflicting basically the powerful and comforting the afflicted. And,
I mean, you're right. And when you get him to answer questions about this case, he wants to talk to you about all the other work the office is doing.
I mean, he didn't want to sit down with us, right? Like we said to him, I mean, we've given plenty of opportunities, sit down with us, talk to us about this case. And I think that he very much didn't want this case to take over the business of the office. I think he saw it as an important case, but not the only case that he was pursuing.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.